Think about the adults in your life who seem to constantly seek approval, or the ones who struggle to trust people, or those who feel an unnamed emptiness they can't quite explain and have spent years trying to fill it with work, relationships, or anything that makes the feeling go away for a while. A surprising number of them share one thing in common: they grew up without a father. This isn't about blame, it's about understanding what happens to a child's mind when one half of their earliest world is missing, and what that absence quietly shapes in them for decades. Father absence is one of the most widespread and least discussed psychological phenomena of modern life. Millions of people around the world grew up in homes where a father was either physically absent through abandonment, death, or separation, or emotionally absent, present in body but unreachable in every way that mattered. And the effects are not small. Research consistently links father absence to higher rates of anxiety, depression, behavioral problems, difficulties in relationships, and struggles with identity. This is not a fringe finding. It shows up across cultures, across income levels, and across decades of psychological research. But statistics don't tell the human story. To understand what father absence actually does, you have to look at what a father is supposed to provide and what happens when that provision never comes. Psychologists have identified several things that fathers in particular tend to offer a child that are distinct from what mothers provide, not better or worse, but different in important ways. Fathers are often a child's first introduction to the outside world. While early attachment to a mother is typically associated with safety, warmth, and emotional regulation, fathers tend to represent challenge, exploration, and the unknown. They roughhouse, they push limits, they say try again when a child falls. Through this, children develop risk tolerance, resilience, and confidence in their own capability. Fathers also play a key role in identity formation. For sons, a father is often the first model of what it means to be a man, how to handle anger, how to relate to others, how to carry yourself under pressure. For daughters, a father is often the first male relationship they have, and it becomes a kind of template. How he treats her, how he speaks to her, how available he is, all of this shapes what she comes to expect from men and from herself. And perhaps most fundamentally, a father's presence communicates something wordless but powerful to a child. You are worth staying for. When that message never comes, the absence speaks just as loudly. For children who grew up without a father, especially those whose father left or was never present by choice, there is often a wound that sits beneath conscious awareness for years, a feeling that is hard to name but easy to feel. If my own father didn't stay, what does that say about me? This is not a logical conclusion, it is an emotional one, and children are not equipped to reason their way out of it, so instead they adapt. Some become overachievers, driven by an unconscious need to prove their worth to a figure who was never watching. Some become people pleasers, hyper-attuned to others' approval, because they learned early that love is conditional and could disappear. Some shut down entirely, deciding at a young age that it's safer not to need anyone. Psychologists sometimes call this father hunger, a deep, often unnamed longing for paternal connection that doesn't go away just because the child grows up. It follows people into adulthood, into their relationships, into the way they parent their own children. The effects of father absence don't stay in childhood, they travel. In relationships, adults who grew up without fathers often struggle with one of two patterns, and sometimes both at different times. The first is anxious attachment, needing constant reassurance, interpreting distance as abandonment. The second is avoidant attachment, keeping people at arm's length, feeling suffocated by intimacy, leaving before they can be left. Both patterns trace back to the same origin, an early experience of love that wasn't reliable. The brain learned a lesson, people leave, and it built its entire relational strategy around that lesson. There are also effects on self-esteem and identity that persist well into adulthood. Many people who grew up without fathers describe a chronic sense of not knowing who they are, a vague incompleteness, as if a part of their story was never told to them. Some spend years searching for father figures in mentors, partners, bosses, or institutions, looking for the stability and validation they didn't receive. For men specifically, research shows links between fatherlessness and difficulties with emotional regulation, higher rates of risk-taking behavior, and challenges forming healthy male friendships. For women, studies have found links to earlier sexual activity, more difficulty in long-term relationships, and in some cases a pattern of seeking older or more dominant partners, unconsciously recreating the search for paternal approval. But this is not a story without hope, because psychology is never only about what breaks, it's also about what endures. Many people who grew up without fathers develop remarkable strengths precisely because of what they had to navigate. Independence, emotional intelligence, empathy for others who carry invisible pain, a deep capacity for self-reflection, born from years of trying to understand their own interior life. Research on resilience consistently finds that one stable, loving adult, a mother, a grandparent, an uncle, a teacher, can dramatically buffer the effects of father absence. Connection is what the child needed. When that connection comes from somewhere, even if not from a father, the damage is meaningfully reduced. Therapy, too, has proven highly effective. Many adults who grew up without fathers describe a process of consciously reparenting themselves, learning as adults to give themselves the validation, structure, and encouragement they didn't receive as children. It is slow work, but it is real work. One of the most powerful things psychology has found about father absence is this: the cycle is not inevitable. Many people who grew up without fathers become extraordinarily devoted parents themselves, driven by a visceral determination not to pass the wound on. The absence they felt becomes the presence they give. The silence they grew up in becomes the conversation they make sure to have. This doesn't erase what happened, but it transforms it. And that transformation, choosing to do differently with what was done to you, is one of the most profound things a person can do. Growing up without a father leaves a mark. That is simply true. It shapes how you attach, how you see yourself, and how you move through a world that sometimes feels like it was built for people with a blueprint you never received. But a mark is not a sentence. The people who carry this wound are also often people of unusual depth, who have done the hard work of understanding themselves without a map. They didn't get a foundation handed to them, so they learned to build one.